Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rachak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, as Israel is gathered to battle against the Philistines. And here we see Goliath, make his taunting appearance to the armies of Israel, striking fear in them. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shoko, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shoko and Azekah in Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched by the valley, the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. So they basically had, their camp, the Philistines had their camp, and they were facing towards one another. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. So between the two armies or their camps, you had like a valley, right? A lower region or a lower land. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had an helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And that armor, that coat of mail, is very heavy as well. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. Once again, very heavy. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs. This is like leg armor. And a target of brass between his shoulders. And when you look into this, it goes into, click on target over here. But it's sort of like the what guards the spaces in between your armor. Right, so it says here, gorget, a piece of armor for the throat. 1 Samuel 17 and 6. Because the way armor is designed, because it doesn't bend a certain way, right? Like how your body is. It's why it's number one broken up into different armor pieces. But also they can't design it. Like, for example, armor made of brass is not designed to bend a certain kind of way as like your neck would, right? So, there are certain places that you'll see people don't have, like in the ancient world or in any of these like ancient movies and stuff. You'll see like the breastplate, you'll see the legs, and then you'll see the shins, the shin guards and all that. Because the way your kneecap bends, they couldn't have armor that was flexible like that. So that area would just be uncovered, or you would need a different layer of here, as we're seeing, like target for those kinds of places, the neck, elbows, in between the chest and the shoulder, the knee, the back of the knee, and all that. Verse 7, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. And what that's signifying is, because a weaver's beam, I pulled it up here, this was used as like the part of the structure of the mechanism that was used to weave, right, to make clothes and so on. And so it was this bar, right, over here at the top, that was basically used to keep the strings or thread, which would come from the sheepskin, usually, it would keep it stretched like this. So you have these, and that way, whoever is weaving would weave across horizontally. So they needed a sturdy and thick piece of wood at the top that would allow for that tension to keep these these strings or whatever, um, um, like stretched. But the moral here being that it was. Let me actually read this little part right here. It says, in the time period of David and Goliath, the warp weighted loom was typically used to make woven materials, right? A loom, that's what it is. A weaver's beam was a strong, long, rounded wooden pole used at the top of a loom to hold the warp or vertical threads. So usually it was a heavy, thick piece of wood, and that's why it likened his spear to that, or the staff of his spear, to emphasize, just how um, not only how mighty Goliath was, but also just the fact that the size and the weight of his armor and all of those. And his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. Is somewhat of an armor bearer, but that would hold on to his shield for him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. So instead of you bringing all your armies here, let's just basically do a one-on-one. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will I be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. So this the outcome of this battle will be based on, or the outcome of this war will be based on the battle between me and your most valiant warrior, as Goliath is throwing out this challenge. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. So bring me your best warrior. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid, because they were looking at his height, his stature, his weapons, his experience. They're like, shit, who's going to survive in a match with him? But they were looking at it carnally. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. Now, when you go into the word Ephrathite, it's dealing with, it can mean either one who is an inhabitant of um, Ephraim, or is an Ephraimite, or is an inhabitant of Bethlehem, because another name for Bethlehem is Ephrathah. So an Ephrathite has those various meanings there. And when you look here at the root word from of Ephrathite, in the Hebrew you have aparth, aparathia, or aparthia, and the root word is aparath, which is Ephrath or Ephratah. And as you can see here, it's another name for Bethlehem. And this explains why it is that when you read in 1 Samuel, the first chapter, it mentions Elkanah, the father of Samuel, as being an Ephrathite who was in Mount Ephraim. Now, they weren't Ephraimites, but they were inhabitants of Ephraim. So in that sense, he was considered an Ephrathite. But here, Jesse, we know, was of the tribe of Judah and was an inhabitant of Bethlehem of Judah. And he is referred to as an Ephrathite because he was an inhabitant of Bethlehem, and another name for Bethlehem was Ephratah. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among, Jesse, that is, went among men for an old man in the days of Saul. So basically, Jesse was um, like an old man. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. So they were more than likely already in Saul's army, being the 3 eldest sons of Jesse, and so they were there at the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next on to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. So they were there with Saul in the battle. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So remember that prior, David was called, right, to basically serve Saul, right, as the harp player, you know, that whenever the evil spirit came upon Saul, he would basically play the harp to soothe Saul. And it says that Saul liked him and basically kept him in his court. And so, um, as it says here, he basically he didn't stay right in Saul's court because he had to keep returning back to to tend to his father's sheep. Hey, yo, get off my feet! What you doing? Salakia. So as it says here, he returned to from Saul to feed his father's sheep. So that's why he wasn't there at the battle. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. So every day, Goliath would come, right, and basically keep presenting this challenge before Israel. For 40 days he did this. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses onto the captain of their 1,000. So, take this provision, right, for your brothers, just to make sure that they're doing good. And then take this also as a gift to their captain. Where we at? Yeah, the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare. So, go there, give them the provisions, and let me know how they're doing. Because, as a father, of course, he was concerned. War is a dangerous thing, especially, a war like this one. And these, where we at? Right, onto their captain, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. So bring back confirmation, as to how they're doing. Now Saul and they that and now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. Right, so they were basically engaged in this war with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. So, he caught them just in time as they were getting ready to go into the trench, and they were like, they had the war cry and everything. So David runs up in there. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage, meaning the supplies, in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. So he basically ran up in there, found where his brothers was, saluted them. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name. Because remember, he had been dishing out this challenge every day. Out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard him, or heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. So they started backing up. Oh, shit. Here comes Goliath. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So, word is that anybody that's able to kill Goliath, the king is going to bless him. He's going to give him, he's going to make him rich. He's going to give him his daughter to marry. And I mean, who wouldn't want to marry the daughter of the king, right? And he's going to make his house free, meaning that they wouldn't have to pay tax. verse 26. And David spake to the men, or you could say free of like any customary charges, right, that were upon the people, because in order to preserve and uphold certain, there's a reason why they enact things that like tax like structures and so on. Surely it was different then than the way you think of it now. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? So he heard them, and he was like, Wait, what are you saying? So what's gonna happen? And taketh away the reproach from Israel. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab his eldest brother heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, Why camest thou down hither? What is it? What do you want? What do you want? Why are you here? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? Aren't you supposed to be taking care of our father's sheep? So if you're here, who's gonna be, who's taking care of them? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. So I know you're stubborn ass. You doing all that because you really just wanted to see the fight that's going on. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? So now what? Now what is it? That you so I came here without for no reason? No, clearly I had a reason, Dad sent me to bring the stuff over here. And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. So he went on. He went and asked somebody else. So wait, you saying that if somebody kills Goliath, that he's gonna get this and that and what? And they told him the same thing. And when the words that were heard, which David spake, they were and when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. So they basically heard like, yo, who's this kid in here inquiring about talking about what's gonna happen to Goliath, and he's an uncircumcised heathen, and how we just gonna let him defy the God of Israel and so on. So Saul heard it, and he went and he sent for him, say, yo, go call him up over here. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So there's no way that you don't stand a chance against him. All right, you're still a young, you're still young. He's been doing this since he was young. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went and I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote and slew him. So he was telling Saul about some of his experiences watching over his father's sheep, and how a lion and a bear came in there, and I think that the lion ended up taking one of the lambs, and he basically went after the lion, right, and got the lamb out of the lion's mouth. And when the lion tried to attack him, he basically killed it. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. So basically, David wasn't no joke, or at least he wasn't a pushover out here slaying lions and bears. Shit. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord Yahweh be with thee. So, hey, well, if you truly think that you can do this, well, then go ahead, go and may the Lord God, be with you. Um, who we at? Verse 38. And Saul armed David with his armor and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go. So he basically was like about to leave, for he had not proved it. So as he was, sort of like moving around in it to prepare to go down, him not proving it, meaning he wasn't used to this, right? David wasn't used, because you don't just get up and put on war armor and just call it a day. Like, for example, if you join the military, certain units and stuff, the helmets that they wear, the night vision goggles, the uniform, the boots, the guns, it looks you know regular, but that's because those that have been doing it for a long time are used to that. For you, it might feel weird at first, you know. And so David, when it says he had not proved it, meaning he hadn't tested it, okay, he wasn't used to wearing it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them, so I can't fight in these. And David put them off him, and he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, with which he had, even in a scrip, because this is basically what he was used to. So he had his sling, he had his staff, he took him some stones, and he was ready. No armor, well, save the armor of God. And the scrip was like a little small bag, like a pouch almost, um, that he had on him. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So he went down to the battle. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. So now Goliath, draws closer. David draws closer, and so does the shield bearer of Goliath. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him. So he was pissed. He was like, "What what the hell?" For he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. So he's looking at him like, "Yo, what's this like young boy doing over here? You mean of all the armies, the troops of your king and all that, he's the one you bring forth? He doesn't even have armor on." And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? So, because David had his staff in his hand. So he's like, the hell I look like? You come at me with a stick like I'm a dog. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. So at this point, they probably weren't like face to face, right? There was a distance between them. So, chances are this Goliath is speaking very loudly at this point, that you just come over here and you're going to be bird food, to put it in modern day English. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord Yahweh of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcass, or the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air. So he was talking real boldly. You know, not only am I the Lord's gonna give you into my hand, I'm gonna kill you, and I'm gonna cut your head off. And on top of that, I'm gonna your dead bodies are gonna be meat for the birds. You want to talk about I'm gonna be bird food. You and your whole army are gonna be bird food. And to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. So just you watch. And all the assembly shall know that the Lord Yahweh saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's to give, and he will give it into our hands. See, so, and David understood this well, based on his experiences. He probably had a lot of close encounters, but with how the Lord dealt with him, he understood, like, all right, this is how the Lord deals. What is there to fear? If he gave me the strength and delivered me from a lion and a bear, Lions and bears, they don't come to talk, and they're huge, sharp teeth, you know. They're like built to kill. Their paws are huge, their claws are sharp. Shit, if you ever been scratched by a cat, with ease, it'll tear flesh. So how much more for a lion that's much bigger, or a bear? So he's like, man, ain't nobody worried, scared, of this Philistine over here. Verse 48, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistines. So now they're engaging in battle. The Goliath is getting closer. David is running towards him. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and sling it. So he reaches into his bag, he puts a stone in his sling, he's slinging, and then wham, you know. And also that was one of the tools of the shepherds too, to drive away, wild animals. So David had to be very skilled in it, with good with precision. So he's slinging and slinging and slinging, whether he's circling Goliath or whatever, he's aiming, and then he lets it rock, and then boom, as it says, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, right in the dome piece. What? And he was done. That the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So he probably slung it. It probably felt like a bullet at that point, you know, with the Lord, putting that real precision and force behind it, right in the forehead. Boom, maybe it cracked the skull. Who knows? Long story short, Goliath was done at that point. Falls face down to the earth. Huge giant. Boom. And you can imagine the faces of everybody over there. Saul's eyes are probably popping out. His jaws are down to his chest. The Philistine army, forget about them. They all probably turned white. They went from dark skin to Edomite looking. you know, Everybody with their mouth open, just quiet, just watching like, oh no, this did not just happen. Wiping their eyes, opening it again. No, I must be dreaming. Because Goliath had been a champion. You can imagine whatever wars they went to, the second he got on the battlefield, either the enemy retreated or he just cooked them easily. And then to fall just like that, quick like that, before David, they were like, oh yeah, no, time to go. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. So he basically killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. And therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out from the sheath thereof. So, when you think of David, yes, he was young, but he wasn't like a weak little boy, you know. So he ran up there, basically unsheathed Goliath's sword and slew him and cut off his head therewith. So he basically cut his guy's head off. Now that's, shit. Because we know when you to cut off a head, you gotta sever the arteries and the veins and the ligaments, all that in the neck. And those things, if it's not a very sharp sword or knife, you're gonna be there for a minute. It's not easy. It can be like freaking trying to chop down a tree or something. But in any case, he whether it was one clean cut or he was slicing it. Long story short, he wham, dude's head is off. Um, and when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. So they turned around and they were out. Their long black legs. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. So usually there's that silence of shock, and then the Philistines booking, the Israelites just start cheering. Go ahead, man. They were out, and they started chasing them down. And pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sha'araim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. So they took off the spoil, and David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor in his tent. So he kept the armor of Goliath, but he took the head to Jerusalem. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. Now, Saul inquiring this does not mean that he didn't know who David was, right? Because before time, David was the servant that was playing, the harp, right, for him. So he knew who David was. He was acquainted with David, but not necessarily with David's background, right, or like his family line, officially. Like, okay, he's son of Jesse. All right, cool. But who is he? Of what people does he come from? Who does he go back to? That's what Saul was inquiring of here. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son the stripling is. Once again, right? Obviously, he knew he was the son of Jesse, but find out more about him. Stripling meaning a young man, or a youth. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. And there's a reason why Saul was inquiring as well, because remember, a part of the reward here too was, just aside from the curiosity, a part of the reward here too was to make that person's father's house free, right? So they won't have to pay any fees or any of those things, and also to give them his daughter. So he had to know all these things, considering what David did was a big deal. And with that, it brings us to the end of 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.